Have you ever wondered about the world beyond our planet? Whenever we think about space or just the universe, we think about giant planets, stars, or even bizarre black holes. But have you really thought about what makes up these things? What's the fundamental basis of all these daily objects that we see every day? Why don't our hand just fall through the table when we try to touch it? Heck, why are we able to stand on the ground anyways? So today, we'll be looking at some of the smallest things in the universe and attempt to explain why to these questions. So, in order to talk about the smallest things in the universe, first, we would have to look at the biggest. Of course, first we have the entire universe, which is a grand and bizarre thing on its own. And then we have our own very Milky Way, which is still insanely bizarre and very, very grand. And now, let's zoom into our own solar system, where we have all the planets revolving around our sun. But let's take it in some more, and we see our own Earth, still a huge planet that we reside in. But let's zoom in some more to where we live, to each individual human. So now, at this level, we see things that we're quite familiar with in size. We see cars, houses, streets, they're quite similar. But what if we zoom in some more on humans? Then we would find ourselves in the world of cells, which is a fascinating thing on its own. But what if we go in deeper? We find all the organelles, but what's made out of those organelles? Atoms. And that's where things get really interesting. At this point, we're at a scale so small that it is just impossible to see what we're talking about. So just to give you a sense of what we're describing right now, an atom, think of a normal human hair. Think about how thin it is, the tiny molecular hair. Now think about 1,000,000 atoms. 1,000,000 atoms can fit into the widths of a single strand of human hair. That is how small these atoms are. Now the word atom actually comes from the meaning of indivisible. Now a long, long time ago, people thought that every single object that we see today are made of very, very small, tiny things called atoms. And why did they name them atoms? Well, they thought that these atoms are so small that they're indivisible. They cannot be divided into further parts. Think about a wooden board. If you cut the wooden board in half, it's still a wooden board. And they thought that if you cut it enough times, then you would have this very, very small atom that cannot be divided up anymore. Well, they were partially correct in that atoms do make up everything, but they're wrong that atoms are not divisible. Now, when we first look at the model of an atom, we first notice that they have this core in the center. And this core, you can imagine it as a really dense ball. And this ball, it's made out of two different particles. They are the proton and they're the neutrons. And they're sort of sticking together into this ball-shaped form called the nucleus, and they're the center of an atom. Now around the atom, there are these very, very tiny particles far away from the nucleus called electrons. And they sort of exist in this weird way like a cloud. And the thing is that at these microscopic scales, at these very, very tiny scales, we can't know precisely where an electron is. Now if you think about our daily lives, sure, that's a desk. It's just sitting there. It can't go anywhere else. Or that's a pen on the table. How can it just suddenly disappear and be at another place? But it turns out, at these very, very small scales, in terms of electrons, we can only predict the probability that is at one place versus another. We can never know when an electron is at an exact place. And that is very bizarre and very weird about these electrons and very, very tiny things in these atoms. But the real question is, can we go even smaller? And the answer? Yes, we can. In fact, each proton is made up of two what's called up quarks and one down quark. They're these, you can think of these as just even tinier particles. They act very, very strangely with each other in a field, in a realm called quantum mechanics, which we won't dive into today. But there are these very, very small particles that make up a proton. What about a neutron? Well, a neutron is made up of one up quark and two down quark. Again, they're these very, very small things that just make up, again, these very, very tiny things. But do we have other really, really small things that we don't see in our daily lives but exist? In fact, yes. And just to name a few of them, we have the up quark, down quark, strange quarks. As we talked about, we have the electron, we have the electron neutrinos, we have all the bosons, and so many more. That's what's so fascinating about this microscopic scale of the universe, about these teeny tiny things that exist in the universe. There's so many of those, and they make up what we see every day. They make up desks, they make up tables, they make up us. Without these tiny particles in action, we won't exist. The whole planet won't exist. The universe won't be formed. And maybe that is the true beauty of these atoms.